everybody, and welcome to the fourth module in Skills for Psychological Recovery. Today we're going to be talking about managing reactions. My name is Dr. Melissa Breimer, and I'm with the National Center for Child Traumatic Stress, which is based out of UCLA and Duke University. So with the goals of managing reactions is basically to enhance skill sets for those survivors who are having difficulty calming down after upsetting physical reactions or emotional reactions. We know that, frankly, after disasters, that there are a lot of different emotions that survivors will be talking about. They'll talk about some bodily reactions like their heart beating fast, or that they're breathing fast, or that they just feel tense or nervous. Some may feel problems with depression or generalized anxiety, or have problems with nightmares, sleep problems. And so part of our goal is there ways that we can help survivors really deal with these kind of distressing reactions and help them with their abilities to handle stressful situations, especially with the ongoing secondary adversities that they may be experiencing. We also know that when survivors get overwhelmed, or any of us get overwhelmed, that sometimes some of our challenges are actually putting those difficult experiences into words so that we can better understand, why are we feeling worried right now? Why are we having those difficulties sleeping? And so then we can really better understand, how do we then handle those situations. So basically, the rationale for this module is for us to, for survivors to be able to, one, understand that all survivors, or most survivors, will experience different distressing reactions, and that these distressing reactions will have negative impact not only on our mood, but on our decision making. It could impact our relationships with others, with our family, with our loved ones. That it may have cause problems in our daily functioning. If we're not sleeping well, we may not be able to perform to the best of our abilities. We may arrive to work late. We may not have a good concentration or attention. And overall, it can actually impact our health. And that what we're trying to do with learning these skills is to manage these reactions. We're wanting to really protect survivors' health. We want to improve their self-confidence, improve their relationship with others, and to reduce those maladaptive efforts at coping. So with managing reactions, there are really just 4 steps involved, but some of the steps are quite lengthy. So like the other modules, we want to explain the rationale for learning how to manage these reactions. Second, we want to identify what are these distressing reactions and what are the triggers. Third, we're wanting to teach skill sets to address these reactions. And fourth, create a plan to manage them. So just like the other modules, we have some sample language to give to the survivors. Of course, we want you to, again, think about how can you use, you either use your own words or words that the survivors have communicated with you. So I'm going to read through them, but I'm hoping as you master managing reactions that you'll be able to create your own scripts. So after disasters, you can keep experiencing strong physical and emotional reactions that affect your mood, wear down your physical health, and cause problems in relationships, decision making, and with getting things done. You may also have reactions to stressful situations and to reminders that add significantly to your distress. It is helpful at this stage to learn some skills to calm reactions, master the memories and situations that are distressing you, and learn some strategies to handle stressful situations that may still be occurring. It's like being in training for the Olympics of stress management. You can learn skills that you can practice and use to help reduce reactions to many different upsetting situations in your life. And I'm hoping as we go through this module, you'll also see that a lot of these situations can actually help each one of you as counselors Being part of this job can be stressful. As we're hearing a lot of what the survivors have experienced or what you've experienced in yourself, that having us learn our own ways of managing stressful reactions can really help even in our own job. So although I'm referring to the work with survivors, I'm hoping that you can also create your own plans to managing reactions. So step 2, after we deal with the rationale for managing reactions, we're wanting to have the survivors identify what types of reactions are they experiencing currently or in the past week. Have them identify what has been overwhelming, what has been stressful. Pick out those circumstances when those distressing reactions occurred. Was it when they were at home spending time with loved ones? Was it after being reminded that the hurricane season was coming upon us? Did they read something that reminded them of the past disaster? It's also important for us to gauge how distressing was this reaction. Was it something that was really only on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 2? Or was it a 10 where it really incapacitated the survivor from functioning for the rest of the day or functioning for the rest of the next hour or so? So it's important for us to gauge how distressing were these reactions so that we can monitor if there are improvements over time. And using a scale from 1 to 10 can really help survivors with that gauge. We also want to not assume that survivors don't have coping strategies already. So we want to, before we move on to step 3, is to ask them, how have they been managing the reactions that they are currently feeling, that's currently causing them distress? Were using these coping strategies successful? Or were they just not helping them at this point? So if you have a survivor that's concerned about the hurricane season and concerned that another hurricane is going to happen in August, we want to know when they get that, when they have those reactions, what are those reactions? Are they getting heart palpitations? Are they getting fearful? Are they getting to the point that they feel frozen? How distressing is it when they think about the upcoming hurricane season? Do they get so worried that they consider it a 10? And when they get these fearful reactions, what are they using to cope with them? And that's kind of what we want to do in this first step. So again, here's some sample verbiage. Each of us has different reactions to different types of stress. Some may be angry, sad, scared, or worried. Some may also have physical reactions like feeling tense, having a rapid heartbeat, headache, or stomach ache. Let's try to identify the major reactions you are dealing with at the moment and try to describe it in your words. Now, when we're starting this managing reactions, one of the things with kids is that sometimes kids really have a hard time identifying that they have a multitude of feelings and anxiety and reactions going on. So sometimes you can have them draw a body, whether it's a stick figure or you can have samples of them, and actually have them color in the different types of emotional or physical reactions that they're experiencing at this time. And that you can use different crayons for the different types of reactions they're experiencing. And based on that, then have them kind of identify which one is the most distressing for them at this point, and the one that they're going to be working on today. As in all of our modules, we do have some provider alerts. And one of the things that we really want to highlight here is that sometimes some survivors will really have some extreme negative emotions that may be beyond skills for psychological recovery and the crisis counseling program. And we may need to think about, are these are these reactions so severe that we do need to consider treatment and a referral. And as you can see here, some of those types of extreme negative reactions are persistent depression, grief, and we're not talking about basic grief, but grief where someone might be incapacitated, having difficulty functioning, and may have strong guilt feelings where they feel somehow that they were responsible for the harm of somebody else, feeling shame or worthless, incapacitating anxiety, thoughts of revenge, and overwhelming rage. Sometimes we also may want to attempt to use this module in some of these cases, but for you all to keep in mind that if those extreme emotions persist, we will need to consider treatment and provide them additional support, and that we can use these skill sets to help in the time period that there might be a lapse between them getting those services, that you could still apply this module if there is a waiting list, or if you know that there's going to be a delay in the transfer for additional treatment. We also want to make sure that there's sometimes that survivors will have strong physical reactions, such as chest pains, and that we really want to make sure that if any of our survivors are complaining, that have we monitored whether they've been evaluated by a physician or if they've gotten medical treatment, and that we may need to consider having a medical referral at that point. So let's move on to step 3, which is teaching skills to address the priority reactions. So in this step, our goal of learning the skills is to give survivors strategies that can help them master the reactions so that they can handle triggers, that they can handle stressful situations or memories that are causing them increased stress or distress. And that the approaches that we're going to go over have been shown to be effective in these kind of stressful situations based on the literature and experiences from previous disasters. And that what we're really trying to do in this step is to increase the survivors' toolkits, that there are going to be a multitude of skills that can help manage reactions, and that for each survivor the same skill sets are not going to always be helpful, and that the more ways that we can increase those strategies that they can deal with in terms of dealing with the different emotions and the different contexts, that's going to overall improve their ability to handle different situations, different triggers, and different memories. So as you can see, there isn't just one category of ways of handling managing reactions, that there are really 4 kind of main categories that we have seen most effective in handling distressing reactions, to anxiety, to grief issues, to loss. And the first is calming skills, that there are some basic skills that we know that has helped in the past. Meditation, self-talk, breathing, retraining, exercise, all of those fall into the calming strategy. And in the calming skills, what we're trying to do is to really help survivors feel less anxious, even to relax their body. The second is to put skills to put thoughts and feelings into words. We know that many times, as I had highlighted previously, that there are over times that we're just stressed, we're just worried, we're just having difficulty focusing. And there are times that our thoughts are so jumbled up that we're really not sure what's causing these kind of feelings or these kind of thoughts. And that sometimes writing exercises really can help start peeling away what are those triggers? Why am I feeling that way right now? Why am I having those difficulties sleeping? And it allows us to think about and put into words what's going on so that we can then really figure out a best course of action. We also know that there are a lot of times that triggers, that there are going to be reminders that impact us, that we may, if we were exposed to the hurricanes, that seeing blue tarps, seeing the hurricane warnings or the symbols, or going through communities that still haven't rebuilt, we know that these reminders can impact us. It can cause us distress. It can cause us our bodies to react, where we can become shortness of breath, where we can become anxious. But we also know that when we have these types of reminders, there's ways to cope with them, and that we can actually help survivors think about, anticipate what reminders may cause these kind of triggers, how to deal with them when maybe we hadn't anticipated and a reminder occurs, and how to calm ourselves down after those types of triggers. And finally, even with these basic, there are sometimes personalized strategies that we know that there are survivors that are going to talk about having problems with their anger, and that they're concerned that their anger is turning to violence, that they're having problems with sleep difficulties and dealing with grief, and that there might be some specific nuances based on these types of reactions that will help them to develop a personalized strategy. So with sleep, reviewing their sleep patterns. Are they taking lots of naps right now because they're so depressed that then in the evenings they're not sleeping well? Are they having nightmares? Is their minds racing? So sometimes we might need to really delve into certain reactions and help them develop their kind of plan. So we want to really help survivors in this first phase to really show that there isn't a one-size-fits-all in terms of skill sets to deal with these reactions, and that for them to look at the list that we just described and ask them, have they ever tried any of these types, and what skill set would they like to or be willing to work on in session with you today. We also want to highlight that practicing the skill set in session is not going to be enough. We need to have them anticipate that practice is very, very important, and that at the end of the visit, to make sure that they schedule on their calendar times that they are actually going to practice these skill sets. And when we want them to practice, we really want them to practice it initially when they aren't in distress. So we want them to practice it so that they can be successful, and that the rehearsal of these skills are vital. So let's go into some of the skill sets that we just talked about. So the first skill set, the calming skills, let's just go into breathing retraining. That we know that when survivors are anxious, or any of us are anxious, we tend to start breathing shallow and faster, and when that happens, even when our breath becomes shallow, we get even more anxious. So one of the things that we really want to try to help survivors with is just to be able to monitor their own breathing. And the way we breathe can really be helpful to calm our strong physical reactions and make it so that it doesn't get worse. So the more that we can have survivors in tune with their breathing right now, the better they are going to be able to control when distressing reactions are going to occur. So one of the things that we want to say to them is that when we are anxious or upset, we tend to breathe faster and shallower. That makes sense if we are fighting a threat, like a tiger in the jungle or running away. But usually we are not doing that. This is an important point because breathing helps us balance different gases in our body that are necessary for healthy functioning. So the way we breathe can be extremely important in helping us to calm our strong emotions down. Those words are good for adults, but we also know that kids, we might need to give them more of a buy-in on why we want them to focus on their breathing. So you see here, there's a script here for helping kids out. So you want to imagine for younger kids, imagine them think of a puppy's running, and the puppy's running around like crazy in the crowd, in the yard, and he's panting, and he's like, his tongue is out, and he has shallow breath. Well, that's kind of what happens sometimes when we get anxious. Our tongues might not be hanging out, but we'll be breathing shallow, and our hearts might be racing. So what we're going to be trying to do today is to practice when a puppy falls asleep, or when that big dog is lying out in the sun resting. And during those times, you will see that the puppy or the dog is slowly taking breaths. That's what we're going to be practicing today, from becoming that puppy running around to that puppy who is exhausted and taking its nap. So we're wanting the child to learn the difference, and for them to see how when we do that, pretend when we're that slow sleeping dog, that how our breath slows down. And of course, if you're working with any child who's afraid of dogs, switch it to a different animal that they're not afraid of. So again, like I indicated before, it seems like this is a very easy thing, breathing training. However, we really need to be highlighting that we need to be practicing the breathing, this breathing skill, and that we need to be first practice it when we're not so anxious, and then work up to when we are. That we need to build this in so you can actually have them practice it before bed or in the mornings, and really help them think about the ways that they can utilize this skill. Of course, we want to check in with them to make sure have they had this type of skill before, and if they have, how has it worked for them, and see if they really had learned it correctly. If they haven't, then we want to kind of go over the steps with them so that they can truly master this. So the next slide is to actually go through the steps with them. So what we're wanting them to do is first for them to get comfortable. Either close their eyes or keep them open, whatever they prefer. You want them to uncross their legs, put their legs flat on the floor, and we're wanting them to take a slow, deep breath through their nose or through their mouth, whatever feels comfortable with them. Extending their stomach, and we want them to focus on their abdomen while they're breathing. We're then wanting to have them count slowly to 5. So we're wanting them to breathe in by counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're wanting them to exhale for the same number of counts. What is important when we're working with the survivors is that the inhale is just as important as the exhale. In fact, the exhale is actually even more important. So we want to make sure that they're not just breathing in slow and exhaling quickly. So we want to watch and monitor that they're slowly counting, that they're slowly exhaling. And we're going to want to repeat this several times and really have them practice it. Part of also with the practicing of this is that we heard it in the positive activity scheduling that thoughts, feelings, and behaviors all are our thoughts, our behaviors, and our feelings are connected together. So we also need to think of, when we're doing this breathing technique, is that we also need to have them have their cognitions slow down as well, not just their breathing. So we want them to think about something, a word that might be calming for them. It doesn't have to be a big imagery of an ocean, but even the word calm. So some type of word that's soothing for them, so that as they're breathing out, they can use the word calm. For kids, we actually can pick something like their favorite color. So we're wanting them to breathe in. What's your favorite color? Asked the kid. If the kid says, my favorite color is pink, then they're breathing in pink, and then they're going to breathe out gray. Gray is that worry, that distress that they might be feeling. Breathing in the pink, breathing out the gray. The second category that we talked about is putting thoughts, feelings into words. So some of the rationale of why to do this is that there's really strong evidence that each of these issues can be helped by having a survivor write them down. So we know that there are some survivors that are going to talk about that they're having nightmares, or that they're having flashbacks about a particular experience that they had during the hurricane, or that they might be having intrusive memories. Some may be talking about that they might be worried about the future, that they really just don't see that their house could be built, or that they're worried about their community, and that or that another disaster may happen, or that they might be having overriding concerns about things that have occurred since then, the secondary adversities that are stuff that's just happening to them right now. And we have evidence has truly shown that putting words to these strong emotions can help to reduce their intensity, help in understanding situations where you might be reminded, and pave the way for helpful communications with others. So teaching how to use these writing skills can truly be help with a lot of these kind of feelings that they have experienced. We also know that, frankly, a lot of times when we do get worried, when we do have overwhelming, distressing reactions, that a lot of times our thoughts just get jumbled together, that it just overall just feels overwhelmed. And it sometimes may make us feel like we just can't function. So basically putting these words and feelings together can allow us to unjumble our thoughts and feelings and help us to organize them, so that we can then think about how we can really understand what's going on, what's the plan of how to deal with them. And then it also really teaches us how to master our memories and our concerns. And also, if the survivor allows us to review some of their writing, it also gives us a lot of insight. Are there things that the survivor that is saying that is stuff that we can work on with them? So in their writings, are they saying that there's no hope for my future? Well, if they're saying things like that, then using some of the helpful thinking module would actually be helpful in this situation. If they're saying that there's nothing I can do about if another hurricane can happen, then maybe we need to help them with some of their preparedness plans and do some problem solving of what they can actually do to make sure that they and their family are safe. So again, as we did before, here are some suggested basic suggestions on what you can say to introduce this skill set to survivors. Distressing thoughts are a sign of unfinished business. This is why these thoughts keep popping up in our minds. We are going to help you with them by writing them down. At the moment, it may feel that they are too big or too distressing to handle. Remember, it takes time for the mind to get used to things. Writing about your concerns will help you to start digesting your heavy memories so that they can stop interfering with your daily life. Another way you can do it is almost saying memories and concerns are like a cupboard of junk. For those of you who are like clutter, you like lots of clutter, think about all the clutter that's in your house or that are in your cupboards. And try to push, and sometimes we like to not think about the junk, so we try to hide it. So any of you who have offices that have stacks of papers, we try to put it in a drawer, or all of our junk, we try to throw it into a place, and then we try to close the doors. Well, sometimes our junk is so, we have way too much junk that we can't close those doors. Or there's so much papers that, frankly, we still can't hide it. And that sometimes, if we organize things better, then actually everything can get put to place. And so part of what we're trying to do is to really make it so that we can sort out everything in our cupboard and pack it away in an orderly fashion so that it can be more controlled and more understandable. So here's what we want to do when we're doing the instructions. Basically, we're going to ask our survivors to designate a time at home where they can have uninterrupted time. It's ideal to try to encourage them to have 30 minutes, but that might not be possible. So we might want to encourage them to break it over a period of over several minutes. But really, we want them to find a place where they can have some privacy. And we want them to think about what is distressing you at the moment. This may involve your experiences during the hurricane, or things that happened since then, or things that are worrying you about your future. And then we want them to start writing whatever comes to mind, and write as much detail as they can. You want them to write about what they saw, what their feelings, what they were thinking about, and write about even those upsetting feelings. Just get it on there. We want them to make sure that this is not a essay, that we're not wanting to, there should be no concerns about grammar, especially with kids who are in English class. They might feel like this is like an English assignment, and so we really want them to not worry about their sentence structure, but just to write down uninterrupted everything that they have to say. It doesn't have to be full sentences, but it's important just to get it down. I know that there are some people out there, including myself, who are always feeling comfortable with writing. So encourage them to is there a voice recorder? Are there drawings? Is there ways to get it down through art or through poems or song? Find some other ways that might be comfortable for them to get their information down. So when they're writing it down, you want them to really kind of think about, are there different thoughts that come to mind during the task? And this is going to be important if they allow you to review their writings. Are there different thoughts, like I said, that are truly not helpful? So, for example, if they're writing down, this memory is so terrible, I cannot cope with it. Well, if they have that kind of thought, then it really goes into the helpful thinking module that we'll be highlighting in Module 5, where we really want them to think about ways of it from a hopeless situation to a more hopeful type of thought. And have them practice actually looking at their writing in terms of, do they have any thoughts that are unhelpful, and changing them into more helpful, such as, this memory is terrible, but at least I could write about it. Or, no wonder I'm reacting to the reminder. It reminds me of a very difficult moment, so that they can actually start thinking about how their own thoughts are maybe impacting their ways that they're experiencing these reactions. We are going to encourage them that doing their writing task several times can actually be helpful to them, because each time that they do the exercise, they can build more and new helpful thoughts and ways to identify. And they also can see what areas in their writing actually gets them distressed, and can we use other types of coping strategies to help them. I know that when doing this with survivors from different disasters, that sometimes it's challenging to have them actually just start doing this writing exercise at home, and that you may actually have them practice doing this in session with you, in your visit with you. Of course, you're not going to want them to spend 30 minutes, but you can actually, after explaining the rationale to them, have the survivor spend about 10 minutes writing it down, what feeling that they're having currently with you. Or if they talked about a certain reaction, have them just start writing it. Not only what their concerns are, but those feelings that are attached to that. And that way that they can actually practice it with you, and you can coach them along. We do want to say that, frankly, this exercise is not for everybody, just like with any of our skills. And that there are some skills that some individuals, as you can see listed here, that we do not want to encourage them to do their writing exercise. And this can be those obviously who are suicidal, who are currently having acute psychiatric situation, those who are under substance dependent, or those who feel real guilt over some action that they have caused. We don't really want them to go home and start writing about it. This is something that we really want to, with these individuals, these are beyond really the crisis counseling program, and we want them to, if any of the people are feeling this way, we're really going to want to work on referral rather than working on these skill sets. With young kids, we may have to do some adaptations. We know that some young kids will have a real difficult time sequencing their thoughts or identifying different thoughts. And they also may have some more concrete types of thinking. They might be more confused in terms of their timelines, that we may want to encourage them to have a caregiver or somebody to help them co-construct their experiences. And this may also mean that you might be in the role of that secretary to actually write down those thoughts, and that the kids dictate them. Typically, we find that adolescents don't have a problem with the writing exercise. They're used to being able to write down their thoughts. They're used to also using, nowadays, they'll use forums such as blogs or MySpace or Facebook to write down their different thoughts and experiences. We would encourage them, though, if any kids are using these kind of public technologies, that the goal isn't for them to make this information public, but to keep it for them and for their own work, to help themselves out. The third category that we had talked about that we're going to highlight today is how do we help survivors manage different types of triggers and different experiences and situations. That sometimes triggers might be internal. They might be different thoughts or memories that they've had, or they might be external, encounters of a stressful situation or a place that triggered the upsetting moment. And that what we're wanting to do is to create a plan for them to handle when these distressing triggers or reminders happen to them, and to have ways of being able to cope before, during, or after. So again, here's some explanation that we can provide to the survivors. One outcome of your experiences is that you have learned that things that remind you of the disaster make you feel anxious, sad, and worried. All sorts of places and all sorts of things may now remind you of the disaster. things that you see every day, or noises that you hear, or smells that you notice. Or you may have experiences in your life that trigger strong reactions because of chronic stress you are dealing with, or enduring, or because of fears for the future. So we can talk about that. Some of these stressful situations can be the daily hassles of not being able to catch the bus, that the bus routes have changed since the disaster, and that these are constant triggers or reminders of the disaster, and that when these stressful situations happen, we tend to get negative emotional or bodily reactions. Again, with our heart beats faster, or that we become tense. That they also can lead to these kind of stronger health problems, where some of us may now be having high blood pressure. So there could be lots of ways that we get upset by reminders. As I highlighted before, it could be the hurricane season. It could be seeing destruction. It could be something that's more personal to the person. If we were with somebody during the hurricane, seeing that person may remind us of the day that we had to evacuate, or the day that we had to fled because of our house being destroyed. And that's not a reminder that may be similar to everybody. So what we're really wanting to do when we're talking about managing and recognizing triggers is to first identify them, and then identify how these reminders are different from the actual disaster, and then to develop a coping plan, both before, during, and afterwards. So we want them to really think about and to identify. You can make a list. Identify situations that trigger your feelings of distress, that make you upset, that make you think about the disaster. It may be upsetting memories of the disaster. It may be dealing with the day-to-day hassles that we're frustrated with. It may involve other challenges, like getting a job interview, or having to move again, or taking a big test at school. That part of when we're going through this exercise, that we're wanting to remind survivors that these experiences, though that they are distressing and upsetting, but they are reminders that we're not actually in the disaster, although we feel like it. Our body is reacting like we are actually in that hurricane experience again. But we need to remind them that we're actually not. That we also need to help set expectations. That we need to actually tell survivors that even us as providers, all of us will have our own triggers. We'll have our own reminders to stressful situations. And that we need to set up realistic expectations to deal with them, and to reassure ourselves that yes, we can handle when these distressing thoughts or triggers happen to us, that we can actually do something to help us. And that the more that we are able to plan for our triggers or for those reminders, the less strong those emotions are going to happen. And just like we talked about before, sometimes actually writing it down and putting our feelings into words can really reduce those strong feelings. So when we're talking about wanting to learn how to deal with these reminders, both before, during, and afterwards, we want for them to develop a plan of what's going to help you deal with these types of triggers. So sometimes getting support from others may be helpful. Sometimes distraction or engaging in positive activities can be helpful. For some families or survivors, actually practicing religious practices or traditions or rituals can help us. The various relaxation strategies, and even to remind ourselves what our strengths are, can all help us to deal with these personal types of reminders. So let's make a concrete suggestion here. So let's concerned that as the anniversaries start coming in the end of August, September, there are going to be some survivors who are going to say that just the anniversaries make them anxious. So the anniversaries may or may not have happened yet, but even beforehand, they actually just thinking about the anniversaries coming may make them anxious or worried. So what we want them to do first is remind them. We know that your heart might be beating fast, you might be thinking about what happened at the time of the hurricanes, but we need to remind them that even though your body is reacting that the actual event is happening, you're actually safe right now. And help them to see that there is a difference, that a reminder is just that, it's a reminder. And then for them to think about, okay, we know that as the weeks approach and as the anniversary starts becoming closer, what can you do to help yourself deal with the anticipated stress of the actual anniversaries? Can we use some of the relaxation skills, the breathing techniques, the self-talk? Can you use exercise to help you with getting calmed down when you think about the anniversary? Can you talk with others who in your family or friends that when you do start getting worried about it, can you work with your family? Can you review your disaster plans so that you can make sure that you are feeling equipped, so that if there is that you know how to cope if there is another disaster. During the anniversary, what can happen at them? Have them actually set a plan up of when it's the day of the anniversary, and I would say actually the few days before and the few days after, so almost the full week of the various anniversaries. What are you going to do? Because you know that you are going to be triggered. You know you're going to see things that are going to be distressing to you. What can help you during these times? Can we actually set up that you will spend some time with friends and family? Can you actually increase your practicing of some of these relaxations and distressing reactions? That you actually practice the breathing techniques, that you use distraction, that you actually increase some of the positive activity scheduling that Patricia had highlighted in the previous module. And if you have been triggered afterwards, what can you do to actively calm yourself down? Can you actually use some of the writing techniques? Can you actually practice at that time some of the relaxation? Can you use calming and reassuring self-talk, such as, I got through it, I got through the anniversary, and I'm okay now. I did pretty well. Have some thoughts in there so that people can actually use those self-talk repeatedly after the anniversary. So you can see there that the coping strategies that we would be using are going to be individualized based on the different reactions that they're going to be talking about, and that having them think about before, during, and after, they may actually think about ways of dealing with it in very different ways. And I ask all of you to think about, when we're going through this exercise today, we do know that those anniversaries are coming. What are your own plans? We know that many of the survivors that you're going to be working with will start, as August is approaching, are going to have increased fears. So what are you going to do now in anticipation for that? What are your own coping strategies? The weeks of the anniversaries, how are you going to cope with those reminders when the media viewing, when the media images, when there are going to be more news clips about the anniversaries? And what are you going to do afterwards? And to develop your own plan so that you can actually practice how this works with even yourself. And goes to our last step 4, is to actually develop a plan. Have the survivor review, based on the skill sets, what skill sets did we learn today? How are they going to practice? When are they going to practice it? Have them actually pull out a calendar and actually schedule in when they are going to practice or the different skill sets, and to think about actually creating that plan. On our next visit, we're going to really want them to then review their experiences. Did they actually practice it? Did the skill set work? Did it work in some situations but not in others? So if they were thinking about the anniversaries, did the practicing breathing help during that situation? But didn't help when they thought about their nightmares that they were having. So do they actually need more tools in their toolbox? We want to make sure, like we do with any of the skill sets, that we praise them for any effort that they have taken, and really promote even the small successes that they had to try to accomplish. And then we also want to review, if the skill did not work, to problem solve. Did they actually completely do the skill, or did they just pick different pieces of it? Can we improve the way that they practice, or do we need to add in additional tools in their toolbox that might be helpful for them in the days and weeks? As you can see, with managing reactions, there are a lot of pieces in this, and that for many survivors, we actually might spend several visits working on this module, because we will go through 1 or 2 skills at a time. We want to make sure that we are realistic and that we're practical, that we don't want to be going through each of the different pieces that we talked about in step 3 in one visit. You want to just practice one of those categories at a time so that the survivor truly has a feeling of success and of accomplishment. And as we move forward with our consultation calls, we're also going to talk about how we can personalize these strategies with some very specific types of distress. So if they are talking about sleep problems, if they're talking about anger, we're going to actually go through how you would do managing reactions with some of the personalized types of very specific types of distress. So as you can see, managing reactions, there are a lot of different pieces to it. But the bottom line is, in the visit, you want to first have them identify what are those distressing feelings or thoughts they are having at that point. How have they currently been managing them? Then we want to identify a couple of skill sets, or one skill set, for them to practice, and for you to go through with them during the visit. And then for them to make a plan of when they can practice it and how they are going to utilize that skill set. So again, we're going to have them identify their reactions. We're going to teach a skill set, and then to develop a plan of how to implement that skill set. And sometimes we may have to do these steps a few times and teach them different skills. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to talking to you soon.